Hello and welcome to BetterTech. I'm Jocelyn Houle, and we're really excited to be interviewing Dara Meath, the CTO of Build-A-Bear. Welcome, Dara.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's really great to meet you. In case there are audience members who don't know, you're the CTO of Build-A-Bear. Let's talk about Build-A-Bear. And some people may be living under a rock and not know what it is. Help us understand what that company does and the scale.
Sure. Well, Build-A-Bear, and you might see my friend here with me, who always comes to an interview. Build-A-Bear is a experience-based area for children, adults, teens to come and build a little special love, a special friend in their life for themselves or someone else. And it's just a really great place to come and get someone special to bring forward into their life. We have stores, retail stores online, and then we're in a lot of different areas like Great With Lodge, Carnival Cruises, FAO Sports. And we've got all these great areas that you can go and really dress them and build them and share a hug and share a special moment with them.
That's amazing. Our family certainly has enjoyed Build-A-Bear and worked. We've gone there with our kids, and I'm sure many others have, and are really excited to hear from you. Your role as a CTO has special characteristics, I'm sure, and every company kind of has a different definition of CTO. Can you help us understand what your mandate is and what types of things you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, I get the really unique pleasure of overseeing all of technology. So, although the title is CTO, which you're right, in every company means a little something different, at Build-A-Bear, I get the opportunity of overseeing anywhere from the hardware and infrastructure and network straight over to the data and AI. We get to work in all of the digital and really back ending and helping to lift those websites and how the businesses are performing. We get involved with everything end to end for technology in the business. So it's an absolute pleasure to be able to put those pieces together, watch them build the building blocks around it, and really see the company come to life as technology touches everything within a business today, and especially at Build-A-Bear.
I want to talk a little bit more about fostering innovation, right? That's the title of our show today, Fostering Innovation and Staying Ahead. But before we do, it's just a very interesting role that you have. How did you evolve into this role? Because I understand you've also worked with a number of small startups.
Yeah, I love small startups. I love big business, and I love putting the two together. Build-A-Bear had that nice centric piece of it. There's so much warmth and smallness to it that makes everything very personalized and makes people really feel like everything they do it from end to end, and it allows them to really see it forward and gives them that love and respect. But what I love about it is the business. So as I fostered others in small businesses, what I got to learn is how the pieces started to build, right? And so we talk about building blocks, how people just started to see their vision, work through their vision, and do it to the sense where technology was going to be inserted into that vision. So maybe you start with a product, maybe you're starting with a technology business. Any way you start, at some point, that has to evolve into communications. It has to evolve into planning and forecasting, right? It evolves into supply chains. It works into warehousing, works into all those different instrumentals, which all takes technology to build it. So it's an exciting thing to watch a company come up and rise. It's also exciting to watch them, pivot in each stage that they go through and hit those milestones. As I look at big business, I've been through so many larger companies, and coming back into the mid-tier, it's watching and showing those pieces that worked for big companies and helping businesses grow into those pieces. So walking into Build-A-Bear was a very natural, next phase for me. The company is amazing. I love what they do for the consumer and what their message means to consumers. So it was able to take some technology and walk through the different words of technology and help the company bring that forward. And in 2023, we saw a lot of success by doing that.
Amazing. So you're really responsible for driving that innovation that's scalable and repeatable in your organization. Do you have any examples to just share with us in the audience to get us anchored in the types of things you're working on?
Yeah, it's great. I think Build-A-Bear, when I walked in, right, we had just a talent pool of great technology associates on staff, and partnered with really good organizations. And we have obviously a really talented group overall for all the different leaders, their teams, marketing, right, digital, and so on. Putting that all together just takes a lot of resources and planning. And so once we started to get together and started to understand what kind of projects were going to change the 2023 landscape, we started to put that together. And so it was a vision, adding that vision into a plan, making that plan come together in executables. And so great examples of that was really changing the way we were doing our point of sale and really touching the consumer in the stores. When you walk into a Build-A-Bear, we have different stations, and stations are great because you walk into your first station, it's like, what bear do I want to see, right? And then how do I want to go and stuff it? And what do I want to put inside of it? Is there a heart? Is there a voice? What is there? And then when you're done that, you can go and dress it, you can go and name it and play with it, and then go over to the cash register. And now we're taking the journey starting at the point of coming in and picking a bear. We now personalize and say, tell me about your bear. And we start the journey alongside with you. And our point of sale does that by helping them to give them, options of what might look good with their bear, help them to go over to the other sections and see the bear differently. And so we're taking them through that journey. We continue that on our digital site. You can go in and build a bear on our digital site. And as you build the bear, you get to see and play with the bear, whether it's a voice or the way you want to dress the bear. And so we're helping to personalize, which immediately brings innovation back out to the consumer, helps them to understand Build-A-Bear in a different way. And we're doing that for so many things. This year really brought, besides new to point of sales, besides lifting our digital sites, we brought in new payment structures, just the way we think about our consumers and how they want to shop with us. And we're bringing a lot more to them, so it makes them easier and faster and the best way that they can check out with us.
Everything you're saying is blowing my mind, and I have a million questions. I want to talk about the tech side, but also the business side, because the retail business is its own special animal. You were mentioning that point of sale. What would you, for our listeners, and I guess for myself, like what has to be true for a great retail experience that's going to, right? It's different now than it has been even
It's
a few
different.
years ago.
It is. And I would say every business is different. I was in businesses that the customer wanted to come in and they wanted a glass of champagne and they wanted to sit down and they wanted to be personalized to in that way. And they wanted to take their time. And then we go into retailers, and similar to Build-A-Bear, where there's time, but there's not as much time because they've gone through their experience. And once they're done their experience, the last thing they want to do is stand at our cash register trying to check out when a kid's like, I just want to go play with my bear, right? And I want to keep going. So there is this modal of like, how do we get them in, have the best experience they can, really help them enjoy, give them a lot more heart to their life. And then when they're leaving, make sure that it's seamless and that they're able to understand that Build-A-Bear is there for them to be able to get out the door. But also, if we have that opportunity, let's have you come back and learn more about us. So making sure that we, hopefully have done a great service and collected their information so that when they come back, they're a part of our loyalty, they're a part of our journey for the future, and they're able to get back in and work with us. So I
I
think,
love that. Sorry,
yeah,
go
and
ahead.
I think, no, I was just going to say, I think in technology, it's tough, right? You have to make sure that you model it to every business that you have.
Right. And also for any product managers listening out there, people who are interested in innovating, I really want to underscore what you're saying. It's such a beautiful example of something like payments. If I was to bring in a young student in product management and say, hey, let's talk about this user experience, this customer experience, they might think, oh, payments is this afterthought, but it's this core component to the whole experience that you wouldn't necessarily put on your list first thing.
You know what? It's so funny. I say that all the time. We talk about payments and we say a couple of years ago, I remember when Apple Pay was still on top, right? And then, PayPal was still leveraging up there. And there's just all these great different innovations that were coming out. We still started to talk about how payments were going to make the difference on the journey. And we know that today on digital, because if you get to the checkout and it's difficult and it's cumbersome and you can't just seamlessly check out, people aren't going to stay on your product line because they can go anywhere, right? And so the goal is to make sure that when they're with you, that they're checking out with ease and process. And we're always continuing to re-innovate that. It's the same thing in store. Besides not wanting to stay in line, people don't have the time, or they might not have the child standing next to them going, come on, mom, right? So we want to make sure that we're always conscious of that. But at the same time, the biggest thing that you can do during all of that is security, right? Making sure that everything that you're putting forth, that the consumer understands that you have their security in mind, that you have a privacy in mind, and that everything that you're building is with that thought process at the head of it.
I was just thinking, Daria, I told you when we briefly pre-met that I'm a data person and worked in tech and data for a long time. And so that was a question I had for you as a CTO. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on how you are, in two ways, using data to innovate and expand, but also keep it safe and private. What are some of the tactics and thoughts you've had around that?
Yeah, I think what's great about being able to be oversight of everything means that you actually get a chance to make sure that it's all connected together, and that's the most important thing. Data is in everything that we do today, right? Whether we're sending out something to the consumer or we're writing an email to a colleague. It's all about the way that we're consuming that and putting that forward into our systems. And so it's such an important part of our DNA as a business. And it's important to make sure that at every point that you're relooking at it. So quarterly, we do heavy reviews against all of our different initiatives and securities. And in that is all the data layers and how they're moving. And we're constantly reconsuming that data into a more safety net environment as we think things coming out onto the forefront of the new year and how things are evolving, the way data is being used. We're constantly reevaluating it and changing and adjusting to it. And so what I love is our future is very agile with that. We're looking at different models that allow us to bring data in and out, but in a very safe and end-to-end point consumption so that it's not touching a lot of different systems. It's not touching a lot of different layers. It's a very seamless process that says, well, the journey is short, which means it makes it safe. And as the journey is going safe, we also end-to-end secure it. And so we do a lot with that. We're constantly looking at rebuilding older services and bringing them into newer services. And so 2024 will be another additional lift against that. And so as we look at those consumers, we have to look at those that are very young to those that are much older and make sure that they understand their safety is first with us. So we
Mhm.
put a lot into our privacy rules. We put a lot into our age gates, which are a part of our business to make sure that you are of a certain age to come shop with us. And we do a lot to make sure that we safeguard that. And then as we look at it, we still make sure that it's personalized. So Gen AI is a part of our infrastructure. We're constantly talking to the consumer and personalizing it. Well, you might have purchased this lovely bear with us, but by the way, he could use a pair of glasses. Maybe you'd like to have a bow tie. Perhaps you'd like to name him differently in the future. And so there's tons of things that we're doing around that to make sure that consumers understand that it's not just a bear, it's a bear with love, and we know how you shop, and we're going to help you to shop the right way.
Amazing. Yeah, I was about to say, because your business has to be so immediate and so focused on personalization, you must be thinking about generative AI. It's probably also, just to let you know, you can't do any podcasts without talking about generative AI anymore. Uh, However, one thing that I was thinking about is you probably were already using a lot of machine learning, right? And how are you thinking about and this for like almost tactically? There's these amazing generative AI tools. You're the CTO. I'm sure everyone's knocking on your door, like, "Hey, what are we doing about Gen AI?" To your
Yeah.
other CTO peers, like, what do you do when you get that call from the CEO, like, "Hey, Dara, what are we doing about this?"
Yeah, yeah, there's always pressure, right? I love that so many people engage into technology, and there's those that are in the marketing field, the merchandising field, the executive field. They're constantly going out and learning. But it does make it a challenge when they come back and say, well, how does this fit into us? How does this work in our tech stack? And you have to be realistic. I think the best thing I've ever done is communicate and be honest. I think it's the best thing you can do as a technology leader and say, I want that tech as much as you do, but here are the steps we're going to need to take to get there. So first, we know if we put Gen AI on top of anything, the data has to be clean and it has to be ready for it, right? There's nothing you can do worse than put something on and suddenly it starts to hallucinate in an AI space, and it's no longer going after the captured audience we were looking for. It's no longer, personalizing the way that you wanted to. And so the goal is to make sure that when you're going into this, that you first have the right environment for it, which means you have to go into a crawl, walk, run approach, just like you would do anything else. So we know that when we started AI, whether it was in a chat box or whether it was something that we were building an algorithm for, it is always going to be that approach. Okay, what am I trying to accomplish? Is it a business goal, and what is our strategy around it? And then making sure you bring all the parties together, because those in the marketing field might be thinking about Gen AI much differently than those in the technology field or in the leadership field, right? Everybody knows about it, but they might not know exactly the strategy and what they want to use it for. And so building that and putting those pieces together and selling the teams, we are going to do this at one shot together, and we're going to do it against one different opportunity. So you may take a holiday if you're a
Mhm.
retailer, or you may take a certain project and you might aim towards that and say, okay, I have one strategy, one objective. We're all going to look for whatever results we want out of it, and we're going to build those results, right? So maybe it's just helping someone have a better experience. Maybe it's understanding our consumer differently. So whatever you're using it for, the optics have to be clear. And when the optics are clear, it's easy to get the results back out from it.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's one thing I want to just double click on, right? Is this ability to balance. I love what you're saying, right? Because you have to bring your peers with you, the decision makers with you, and you meet them. What I hear you saying is you meet them where they are to help them understand from a business perspective.
Correct. That's
Yeah.
absolutely, you have to listen. I mean, as a technologist, you're there to advise, you're there to steer them in the right direction, and you're there to build and execute the results. But you're not there to always go in and put something forward. It's a partnership. And what I love about Build-A-Bear is the leadership team is fully partnered. It's one of the reasons I wanted to go there, is because everyone has a voice, everyone has an opinion, everyone has value. And so it's working as in tangent together. And then it's the same thing with all the associates in the company, right? So when we build something, we bring everyone in. If I'm building something for, let's say, finance, it's not just a financial project, right? It's a financial project that has end results back into the merchandising team or the marketing team or the operations team. And so all of the parties have to come together to constantly understand and build it together. And
So
that's what I love.
yeah, and I think that's an interesting cornerstone when you are fostering innovation and trying to stay ahead. And a lot of small companies, I think forget this, is the ability to stick together is an asset all by itself.
It is. It is. If you lose sight of that at any point, I think you go off your journey, and I think the results are it takes you longer to get there. You're no longer speaking the same context. So what you're seeing is people are thinking that the results are coming out the right way, and as a result, you fail. The project doesn't go any further.
Mhm.
So we don't put our initiatives and our goals are to put things forward together, and if you do that, you can grow into the billions and the billions and the billions because suddenly everyone's aligned.
Let's yeah, right. I want to talk a little bit more about that, but in the context of fostering innovation and staying ahead from the perspective, I'm thinking of our listeners. Maybe there's somebody who's kind of like you or wants to be like you in the next few years. They're trying, maybe they're working at a very small company or a mid-sized company looking to grow it. What would you say in the Dara Meath business book that that we write? What are the key pillars to fostering innovation?
Yeah, so fostering innovation is knowing that every time you go and do something, to make sure that you are constantly re-educating yourself. I think the biggest thing that you can do is to keep learning, right? Because innovation changes each day, and the meaning of innovation changes each day, right? In my current role, last year, Gen AI was our buzzword. The year before that was probably just AI itself, right? Was the big buzzword. Next year in 2024, there'll be a new buzzword, but it's like not just knowing the word, it's knowing what it means and what it means to your business, to other businesses, to the consumer, what is happening with it. But it's also re-educating each piece of it. As we constantly are changing, right? We have to keep learning and redeveloping ourselves. So innovation is not just what you think, it's what you know and learn and can rethink and can relearn. And
I
that's what
love
I
that. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And just to dig a little deeper, like what are the tips and tricks in there? Because I do think everyone says, "Hey, you got to listen, you got to keep learning." But there's this, is learning can be painful
yeah,
sometimes.
it is time consuming, right? I would say that, I learn from so many different avenues. I learn constantly from those that work for me. I always say I'm only as good as everybody that's around me because I keep really smart people with me, right? Because they help to keep learning and then they re-educate me. And I love that because each day, I put so much into, and I'll say this, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, it's also a lot of cost. In our budget, we have, started off with so much in the budget to be able to go after education and certifications with all of the associates in our department. We then, over this next year, double that, right? And then next year, we'll double that again. And the goal is to keep helping others keep growing themselves. And through that, you naturally keep learning from them. At the same time, while they're doing that, it's your job to go do that yourself. So I'll take online classes, I'll go through podcasts, I'll read constantly, right? So I think every night I fall asleep to some kind of article or some kind of news, something new that's happening. And it's in business, right? It's in tech. We can't make it just on one area. Otherwise, if we only said we were tech leaders, we would have one hat for the coin. If we never said we were business leaders as well, we wouldn't understand business. So how do you put tech into a business you don't understand, right? So it's key.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of just summarize a little bit of what I'm hearing you say, because I think it's so important for our audience and for me to remember too, is that, lots of leaders say we always want to learn, but that it's kind of treated like off the side of the desk. And so what you're saying is, as a leader, you're making it a part of the job, you're funding it. That's kind of amazing to just point out, right? Like that's a
Yeah,
real part of your job and an expected place for you to spend time, not just extra on the weekends or whatever the case may be. And the other thing I love that you're saying is to relearn and revalidate what you think you know. I find this so much with leadership is they knew something that was super valid 7 years ago, 5 years ago, and then they sound a little dusty.
that's correct. You've got to stay really ahead of things. I mean, every new year, there's new words getting added to the dictionary. So, what are we adding to our own dictionary, right? What are we adding to our own books in house? And I think it's super important that everyone stays educated on my team and they feel empowered that way, right? Whether it's me being in news sources, I bring in tons of different professionals to come in and talk now. So we're going to do an IT summit in the spring this year, and I'm bringing tons of different leaders in from the community to talk about what they're doing, to just give different values and views about what's happening within their business and how they're using their technology, how they're using it to landscape their business. And for me, it's just different ways of re-educating my teams, because everybody learns differently. Some people learn really great in a classroom setting. Some people learn on the job really well, and others like to listen and learn. And so by giving them every opportunity, I think each one of them feels empowered. And at the end, each one of them want to stay longer and grow further with you. And so there is that whole hidden agenda underneath that says, if you build it together, people want to stay together and watch it come together. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I think these are all really great points because, especially because technology and data is such an intersectional activity that requires new information. And we've talked a little bit about collaborating with your peers and making it understandable for all different types of partners in your journey. I know you've been working with a lot of startups. I want to ask you a few questions about your advisory board work as well, but help us understand from your perspective as a CTO of a successful company, when you think about like small, medium, large,
Mhm.
as like set areas like maturity for a company, how do you see that in terms of assets and pitfalls? So you're very small, yeah, and then you're growing. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, well, look, small is ambitious and exciting, and they have only so much cost and resources. And so what happens is I find they feel like they get blocked out very quickly because they don't have everything at their fingertips to go and grab and do. And so whether it's, the funding only goes so far, or whether they only have so many resources because they only have so much funding, I find that the business is super exciting. And so what you find is visionaries sometimes can't get out of their own way because they think they're blocked because they don't have something in front of them to go and obtain. And so I constantly remind them that they're not, right? They just have to relook at the way that they're using their resources. And maybe they have to go get a few more handouts before they're able to do it themselves. And that's okay, right? Because handouts are quite fine when you're starting to build. And sometimes they have to go and do some more freebie things, right? Maybe they're attending events on, someone else's coattails, right? Maybe they're going and they're learning by doing a lot more investigation than others have to. There's a lot of ways to obtain a great business as they're building it. But the goal is to keep driving them and make sure that they feel like each milestone is a big win. So I say the smallest wins are the biggest wins we always have, because every small win builds into something so much bigger in the end, right?
Mhm.
And so I make sure that they remind them to build into small wins and celebrate each one. Maybe they got a new vendor, maybe they put their first product online. It's just
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
exciting little pieces.
Base
Um,
hits.
yeah, it's really basic, right, and fun. And then as we look at middle-sized businesses, you often get caught up into, okay, now I'm, I don't know, $500,000, right? How do I get into the billion-dollar mark, right? Or how do I get into the million-dollar mark, right? And so whatever that milestone might be that people are looking towards, it's how do I get past that next hump? And that takes strategy and innovation and a clear goal. And it has to be thinking outside the box. Whatever you were doing for the last couple of years that got you there was fantastic, but that just stabilizes you. Now let's think of new ways of getting there, right? Maybe it's a new avenue of sales that we need to introduce, or maybe it's a new market you need to get into. So as I look at businesses like Build-A-Bear, which is at this amazing marker, right? We are on the cusp of doubling our business in the years to come. Such talent, such innovation. I look at the ways that we're going to be doing that, and there are so many avenues open to us. It's incredible. And we're all thinking outside of that. And then as we look at big businesses, I think that the strength hold there is to make sure that companies start to make sure that they, well, as they're there, continue to communicate. I think what happens in big businesses, you find silos, right? And those silos don't give you the opportunities to forge that communication or that interconnectedness that you need. And so they get stuck in their own pods and they forget to go ask for help in other areas. And so what big businesses do really well is they have a successful business with a lot of talents and they're constantly churning out things. Well, what they sometimes forget to do is that they're too big and they forget the smaller things and how those little wins are going to help them succeed to become bigger and bigger. And so they don't necessarily always innovate as quickly as others do because they can't get into their own grooves or into their own initiatives in a cadence that works for them.
So if you wanted to be an innovator, even in a mid-sized or large company, what I hear you saying is it's really important to create those cross connections. That,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It is. It's constantly, I think in technology, it's a work in progress every day. And so when you think you have it figured out, you don't. You have to go back and reinvent and relook at something. And so when you think that you've had enough meetings with some department, and you're like, oh, I'm good. I just put a go live project for them. They're sitting pretty for a while. Don't, because you have to go back to them. You have to reconnect with them. You have to ask them what's coming up. Every quarter in business makes a difference. And so the goal is to constantly reapproach. And that's hard on a leader, right? You constantly are going after something. You feel like you're constantly selling yourself and you're part of the business to go get them to insight and bring forward. But someone has to be the connection tissue. And I feel like technology does that for businesses today.
That's my best advice for a lot of technologists is to continue to have meetings without too much agenda. I know that's like counterintuitive. And when you go to business school, they're like, have an agenda and make sure everybody gets checked off. And, I know those meetings are great too, but I do think, I tell people it is actually like a real part of your job to call people up, find out what they're planning, just kind of shoot the
Yeah, it's true.
the
It's true, right?
breeze. Because it really creates that for when you do have something important to do. You've got the relationship, you've got the context. I'm a kind of context person, so
Yeah. Well, you
uh,
know what? My favorite thing to do is to walk into a room and have blank paper everywhere and just say, what do we envision? What do we see? I think white papering walls and getting people to think and to draw and look, I draw stick figures very well. I'm a line to line kind of person, but the creativity comes out of that. And so every new project we approach, we do that effect with it. And so luckily in our business, we have a lot of wink walls and allows us that freedom to interchange. But I suggest that everywhere. So if you have to do meetings online constantly, pull up a whiteboard app. Make sure you're constantly talking about it. Don't make it just a verbal conversation. Make it a visual conversation so the context flows together. And make sure that you're speaking, because and drawing can be fun. It adds a whole new layer of things. The best meetings we always have is when it has food with it, right? Lots of laughter, lots of white paper, and lots of fun. It breaks down the hardest problems into the most basic elements and then allows you to rebuild them into the complexity that they need to be in the future, but in the right way, in the right form. And at the end of the day, you have fun with it, right? So laughter is the best thing that you can ever have.
And it's very strategic. I want to just point out that it's not a side thing. What I hear in between the lines of what you're saying, you've got a lot of great tactics, but creating an environment of where it's secure to play, to have fun, to try new ideas. That environment is tricky to really create. And once you do, it's, I think, worth hanging on to because it does drive innovation. Let me switch gears a little bit because I understand that you also, you're an advisory board member. And so
Mhm.
you've been kind of working to leverage that position to help other companies and people. I have one dumb question though, which is what is an advisory board member?
Yeah. So it's very similar to a regular board member, only the difference is you're helping to let's take for example, a WILDA, which is Women Leaders in Data and AI. In that advisory board, what I help to do is formulate the new programs that we're going to initiate. I help to formulate how we obtain more members. Right, we help to guide and suggest on big initiatives for the new year, on even cost values that they can have, and where we might put in new different cast members or even associates that might be hired. So it's very similar to a board position, but the difference is I think you get to help guide the CEO in a different way without the pressures of making all the determinations of the business. It's more of advising them to do the best they can for that organization or business.
Interesting. And so how do you think you can use your advisory board positions to evolve the general technology innovation discussion?
Yeah, I think, well, first is there's so many great advisory positions out there. And so I would suggest if people are looking towards that, make sure that you put yourself known out there. There's so many different companies that are looking for more advisory board members now because technology is evolving constantly. They're now putting technology at the top of their conversations, right? So when they're sitting in their own boardrooms, they're starting to think about what else do we need to keep innovating? And technology comes to the forefront of that. And so they're looking for people in the data space. They're looking for people in the hardware and infrastructure space because that's constantly changing, or the cloud space, right? Communication, telecom's a big one. And so as we think about it, the best way to advise with that is just staying landscaped against it and understanding those areas. And making sure that you're constantly being in contact with others that are in those spaces. So I just came out of a cloud and telecom conference that I was super excited to get into because, G5 was such a big thing that changed the way that we're all looking at telecom. And then what are we going to redo to address that as we need to look at our pipelines and what's coming out after that, right? How is quantum coming out, right? What are we all doing in the AI space to build into quantum, or as you mentioned, machine learning? And so it formulates to so many things. And then what I like to do is I continue as I build that is to then re-advise that per different organization that I'm working with. So if they're looking at a new factor around it, I'm helping them to understand it and then also putting them in touch with people that know it. So giving them advice on good companies to go look at, giving them advice on how to go and talk to others about it. So it's a great networking. It's a great way to put the pieces together so that you keep growing and for yourself and for your businesses.
That's amazing. So in your professional role, in your I guess extra professional role as advisory, a board member, what are your thoughts in technology about kind of like what do we need to be as leaders in technology? Things we need to be thinking about. We talked a little bit about privacy. I can't help but mention like getting enough women in and people who are not like underrepresented. Like, what are some of the kind of big ideas that you're thinking about and coordinating with your boards on?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, yes, as we all said, security and privacy are probably the top of mind, but they have to be, right? In anything that you do, they're just a part of every conversation. And that's great, right? Because then if you're doing it, you have some governance around it and you're going to do it right. But I think some of the big things that we're looking at is obviously continuing to innovate and drive the way that we are running our data. Our data is going to make the difference for how we understand our business, how we operate our business, and what we're going to do in the future with the business. And so it's really important that data is always at the forefront. But it's not just consuming data; it's consuming it and then reevaluating and using it. That's going to be tactical for the business and give them the strategies that they need. And so data is always going to be, I think, in the next few years, a part of everyone's conversation, which leads into AI and the way that we use that data to string in the AI to say, now we can get it more robust, right? And now we can use it to more of a learning capability that really drives the business more successfully.
Oh, let me just pause you for a second because I want to summarize for the listeners too. I think you've had some really great points around this adopting generative AI uh, approach, which is what I'm hearing is keep all your friends, all your peers have to be signed in, right? You keep all your peers and signed in, understanding the benefits and the risks and the timelines. And I hear you also saying like pick your use cases. You don't have to be all in day one. And the other thing, which may have gotten overlooked if you've been listening to this, is the ability to benchmark. I think on a quarterly basis, you're checking in and a kind of it sounded to me like not like overly onerous process, but a process nonetheless to check in and see if you're happy with the results.
Yeah, great recap. And thank you for taking that all out of what I said. It's fantastic. But yeah, that's a great recap. I think quarterly you evaluate the technology, you reevaluate the associates within the technology and make sure that they're still sitting in the right seats against what they're doing. And you reevaluate your business. So every quarter it's essential because every quarter we know every day something new is happening or being built in technology, right? It's happening so quickly. So quarterly seems like it's the right time. If you wait till end of year, you're catching up. And that's too long for me because I feel like, and every end of year is different for everyone, but I feel like at that point, you're already in that long stretch of next year. How do you even know what you want to change for next year if you've waited till that point? Right. So the key is quarterly to quarterly. And I think there's a lot with that as we keep growing. So it works for
Mm.
me in the business. It's worked for me for successful. And I think my associates don't feel it's so onerous when you do it quarterly because there's a lot that you need to still take out of your own groups, right? And so by keeping them on task that way, they're starting to feel like it's a part of their routine and they're prepared for it and they're ready to engage in it. Waiting till end of year, as most companies do, they're just like, nope, this is going to take too long. We're never going to hit every objective and we're not going to get to it.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear you say that. This time of year, right? I was just explaining to some colleagues, like in big enterprise, right? Everything gets very sleepy at this time of year. And then everyone shows up early next year and starts like freaking out because they promised a bunch of stuff. And everyone's like, game on. It makes for a very like difficult tempo if you
Yeah,
are only doing it on an annual basis. So as a thinking of like as your role as like a tech leader, I'm sure you've got some other women peers who you said you're an advisory board. I'm sorry, tell me the name of the organization one more time.
sure.
Women leaders.
Yeah, women leaders in data and AI. So it's called WILDA. And we have, I have many advisory boards. I get a really
Oh.
great pleasure of sitting on a lot of different advisory boards. But this happens to be one really focused around women leaders in the data and AI space, which is unique because, as you mentioned, there's not too many women leaders out there, very few C-suite technology leaders that are females, although I feel like it's growing at each aptitude. And so what's exciting about these types of opportunities and bringing female leaders together is that we are building for the next generation. And I find that those that are tech stars rising up through these organizations, they're really feeling empowered talking to someone who is a C-suite and what their journey was, and that their journey wasn't perfect, right? Everybody had to learn. I could tell you sleepless nights, I mean, that I spent trying to figure out problems and concerns. How many calls I took in the middle of the night for, servers being down, or how many times I slept underneath my desk trying to figure out why I'm still doing what I'm doing, right? But it's all a part of the journey that we take because when we're very passionate and when we believe in what we're building, we're going to see it through. And so that doesn't mean that it's always going to fit together, right? If we were to think about the way that AI is built, right? You don't take one algorithm, say, boom, I'm done, let's walk away, right? You have to rebuild it and rebuild it and rebuild it. And you have to build it in a lab consequence. And so a lot of things we do in technology is through a lab innovations. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of female great leaders out there and more to come. There's so many fabulous leaders in our government that are hidden gems in the CDAO space, right, in the CIO space over there. I have so many that I've met, so many in the private sector as well, in the public sector. It's just a very exciting time to be in technology and to meet so many other really passionate leaders. but I really hope to see more as they come. I know I mentor a lot of technology leaders coming out of like Columbia University and other areas.
Mhm.
So I'm super passionate about that. And those that work for me, I'm constantly mentoring. And then I build a mentoring relationship for others. So if you're interested, whether you're on our service desk or whether you're already in a development role, we build mentorships so that you can learn from others and have a safe space to go and talk to, and really just kind of keep helping yourself build yourself further. So I suggest that for everyone. Build labs, build safe environments, build mentorship programs, and continue to build educational programs within your own resources. Take some of your budget and do that.
Mhm.
You have to slice it off from something else, which I had to do, but I knew when I did it, it was going to work forward for us, and it did. And so we keep doing it.
Oh, that's great. I love that. My new recent thing I've been doing is reverse mentorship as well. Like I have mentors who are much younger than I am in technology. It's super handy actually. One, because I learn things, but two, it kind of puts you in that mindset. I can't help, like giving is getting and getting is giving. I don't know exactly what the elixir is there, but it makes me a better mentor when I'm getting advice.
I
So
think that's fantastic. I love that. I guess in some ways I get a little of that, but I haven't concreted it out, but I think I will in the future. I think that I love that.
it's important. And I just think all of us can really I always try and say yes when people want advice. Always try and
Yeah.
say yes to that call. If you can, it's really helpful for a lot of folks and including yourself. All right. Well, I want to come down to the kind of end of our discussion here. And I think what I ask you to think about, or you just summarize is, let's say I've got two questions. Let's say I'm starting out. I have I'm the CEO of that $500,000 year business. I need to grow, but keep innovating. What are some key pieces of advice? Two or three things, like don't forget this.
Yeah. It's a great question. I To summarize in 2 to 3 is make sure you do celebrate the small wins. I can't encourage that enough because everyone shoots for the big unobtainable wins and think that that's where they need to stop, and it's not. So make sure that you do celebrate the small wins and make sure that you bring those on the journey with you, celebrating with you, because they're so important to remember. Each small thing is a milestone, and your business will keep growing with that. To make sure that you do go out and look for some of those resources that are out there that are going to help you to learn more. So don't be afraid to go out to some of the events that come up. Don't be afraid to listen to podcasts like this, which are fantastic, right?
What are some of your favorite resources? You've mentioned that a couple of times. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but do you have any recommendations for us?
No, no, please. I think, throughout the year, some of my best things was first, I'm a big Forbes reader. So I don't know if everybody's a Forbes reader, but Forbes has some great articles. They do a lot in the technology space, but I read a lot within that. Total Retail is one of my favorite, and it is one that talks a lot about retail. They do podcasts, they do events. And the reason I like it is because it scales across the globe, and it really talks about different ways that people are using, whether it be technology or using business. And it also gives you the latest news. So I love it just because there's always something to learn from that. And so there's
I
just so
love
many
that.
great.
I just interrupt you. I love that because we all experience retail as like shoppers, but the actual business of retail is very difficult.
It is. It is. And I think that that's where I learned the most. I mean, I happen to be in retail today, but I've not always been in retail. And yet I was always drawn to learning from retail because everything we do, right? If you think about some of those really big leaders out there, the Amazon, Disney, Tesla, all of them are giants in the technology space as well, but they're retailers and they all forge together. And so I think that, there's so much to learn in that space, as you said, because it is tough business. It changes all the time. And so people are if you can stay in the business and be successful, then there's something to learn from your story. And I think that's how we empower. And so it works the same way. I've always been in different areas, but it's the area that I find the most education from. And of
Total
course,
retail. I like that. I'm taking that down. And also just quick note for our listeners, right? That's great if you're in the retail business, but I would also suggest if you're an investor, really
100%.
understanding retail is just gives you a lot of foresight and a particular perspective that others may not be getting.
I completely agree with you. And I love that because investors are always relearning because they want to know what's coming out next. And these types of areas are so important. It's even listening to some of the things on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn does a great job of giving you a lot of insight, a lot of advisory. And so I love just staying active as wherever you can, right? Again, taking little bits and pieces from everything. And even the local news, right? I'm still an old-fashioned newspaper person as well. So I know a lot of people aren't, but I see so many books behind you. I have avenues of books as well. It's just taking resources from everything. And I do a lot of like listening for audiobooks.
Yeah.
Audiobooks are a great way to get into something and really learn differently, to understand it differently, and then not to have to worry about, oh, I just fell asleep with a book on me again,
Right.
right?
And you can do cooking while you're listening to a podcast or whatever else. So it's kind of nice.
Well,
Double. Yeah.
you can use it on the flights, you can use it while you're traveling. It's such a big, good engagement point. So there's just so many different things that I would
Okay.
say.
I interrupted you because I got excited about total retail, but what you're saying is, make sure you celebrate those short wins and be milestone focused. Stay educated and cross pollinate everything you know. Anything else that you want to make sure these young CTOs and CEOs know?
I would also suggest, if you can, get an advisory board. Advisory boards are not the cost of a board, right? They're really there to help advise you. They're really there, and boards are fantastic as well, right? I'm a board member as well, but I would highly suggest getting advisory boards. They will help you to gain the success that you need, help you to foresee things that you just can't get past those small blockers. They help with that, right? Find people in the industry like myself who have been around, who have done a lot of different things and help you build that. I think that's one of the best things I can provide someone when they're at that point of ready to launch off and hear opinions. Again, don't be too safeguarded. Make sure that you can take down a little bit of that and take some advice. Advice is how we all get through learning and getting to our next step in life.
I'm delighted that you're mentioning that, and I really can't underscore this enough. Something a lot of entrepreneurs and even like mid-sized business CEOs and leaders don't understand is that people love helping you if you have a specific question. It's like quirky. You're sitting at home, you're you're by yourself. You think, why would someone engage? Why would this fancy person engage with me? Honestly, people love helping.
They absolutely love helping, and and it's up to them to take what advice they want from it. But there are a lot of leaders out there that can give you some great advice that can help you move forward and past that mid-year mark or past whatever that milestone is that you're trying to get to.
Well, Dara, I've really enjoyed speaking with you. I think we need to do another podcast on time management because you're clearly an expert. You've got a lot of things going on. You're reading a
Yeah,
lot. You're on the advisory boards. You've really inspired me today chatting with you. The only thing I need is just one more view of the interview bear so we can sign off.
absolutely. It's always
It's been
yeah.
great. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording. It's been great talking with you today.
Thank you. You too.